Well, welcome. We're starting a new series. Nancy, well, we'll get an introduction, but you're going to meet somebody or re-meet them who was one of the very first people that came on Medical Review many, many years ago. And now we're going to start and update some of the topics that, although they seem pretty mundane, become critical when the times call for them. You know, things like having your healthcare proxy. You know, at my age, I'm a manly man. I don't need that. Well, then you find out maybe you do. Things like having living wills, all the little pieces that at my age you want to put off because you don't want to admit you're getting to the age where you need them. Nancy's educated us many, many times on critical issues. So let's start with an introduction.
My name is Nancy Durkin, and I'm with the VNA and Hospice of Greater Milford. The VNA and Hospice has been around since 1918 in the Milford area. And for a while we were part of Milford Hospital, and then about 4 years ago we became part of the Salmon Healthcare system. So sometimes you'll see us with a new name of the Salmon VNA and Hospice of Greater Milford, but it's still us. And I've been with the agency for over 20 years now. I am the manager of the social work department, and I wear a couple of different hats there. But part of what you and I have been talking about is how do you start to have, how do you even start to think about what do I want for my health care? How can I be in charge of it? And then how do I have difficult conversations with family members about either what I want or what they want? So that's kind of where you and I have been talking about, can we revisit some of these topics?
Well, I mean, I would think, you know, when you mention the conversation, and you sit there and say, well, wait a minute, it shouldn't be hard to have a conversation with my sainted mother, father. But oh my God, when you start talking about DNR, just the idea of admitting that I'm at the age where I should talk about it scares old men.
I think it scares everybody. And I think if we start to have the conversations, it will become less and less scary. And if we think about it, less than 100 years ago, most people stayed in their own homes, died in their own homes, had their wakes in their own homes. It's only been in the last 75, 50 years that it's become, this is not a bad word, but it's been very medicalized. Like, go to the hospital and do that end of life stuff there and don't talk about it until that very last moment. But part of my approach with people and family members is that knowledge is power. And if I understand my medical condition, which then makes me responsible for having very direct conversations with my doctor, then to take that, think about that, explore that with people I trust, whether it's a family member, a trusted friend, or in my case, a social worker, having a social worker come in and talk about it, and then put together what do I really want? What do I value about how I am treated and what my health care is going to be all about? And there are different ways that we can tackle that. The most basic for anybody over the age of 18 is to have a healthcare proxy. And a healthcare proxy simply states that if I am in a condition where I am unable to speak for myself, I designate this person who understands my wishes to speak for me. If you don't have that document, the doctor's hands are pretty much tied. So if you're in an automobile accident and you're unconscious and the doctor wants to treat you, the doctor really can't do anything until that healthcare proxy agent steps up to the plate and says, oh, I know what Nancy wants. And most people are surprised when I say anybody age 18 or older should have that done. Because once you are 18 years old, you are an adult and you are responsible for making your own healthcare decisions. Before 18, a parent.
Mom and dad can.
Right.
But you think about it, and I don't want to put that burden on my kids. Right, wrong, or indifferent, what would get me to do a healthcare proxy, what would get me to do a decision, and not my place to say yay or nay to a DNR, but what would get me to make that decision is I want to be able to pick somebody. I love Jeff Hopkins. His heart's in the right place. He runs a great ER, but I don't know him well enough to say, yeah, you know exactly how I want to be treated.
Right.
I want to be able to turn around and say, my daughter, this daughter, that daughter, my darling bride, whoever.
Right.
I just don't want to dump it on, okay, one of my kids will step up.
Right. And you have to, you put it in writing, and then to be fair to your daughter, have the conversation. And that's where it really gets to be time to do a little homework. What does that mean? Do I want to be resuscitated? If my heart stops, do I want CPR? If I need a feeding tube just to keep me nutritionally sound, do I want that? And having that kind of conversation with your healthcare proxy agent helps them to be clear on what to say to the doctor when the doctor comes in and says, this is where we're at. And most times, couples tend to choose each other. But if you think about it, if you're in an automobile accident, what are the chances of you being with your...
Well, see, there's the issue. And when I say dump this on my kids, wait a minute. I want to make those decisions up front.
Right.
And, if I get into a situation, regardless of how I got there, and I'm going to be a mental vegetable for the rest of my life, do I want to be resuscitated or not? Now again, that's your decision to make.
Right.
I would hate to have never told my children. Or let's say I have one child. We all love our children, and you love them equally in different ways. But you can have one child who's a lot more analytical, who can make the decision, and another one who's a lot more emotional and would be a wreck for them to say, wait a minute, Dad told me up front, if there's no hope, do not. I can tell you, I don't want to be in a bed having my children see me as a stick figure.
Right.
But that's my decision.
Right. And I think that's where you put on your thinking cap. And I can remember years ago, my partner and I had the conversation about healthcare proxy. And I said to him, at this point, we're not married. So, the doctor may, and this was before the healthcare proxy got as strong as it is, may go to your mother to say, what do I do about this? And he's like, well, I don't want them contacting my mother. So he made the decision to make me his primary healthcare proxy agent with his brother as a backup. And then the three of us sat down and had the conversation. The flip side was, for me then, to have a conversation, and he was very clear, my partner was very clear on, I don't want to be resuscitated, I don't want a feeding tube, I don't want to be intubated, he was able to tell me very clearly, with the caveat of, but if I'm only going to be unconscious for a couple of hours and I'm going to be okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Treat
Don't
me.
be pulling the plug if
Right.
I'm going to be sleeping for an hour.
Right, that's ridiculous. But the flip side was when I said to him, for me, I want to be plugged up to everything because I believe in the medical system and someday they're going to find a cure for whatever has put me in this state. Can you honor that wish? And he said, no, I can't. I would not be able to do that for you.
See, and that's the part where, okay, I'm going to choose somebody. And I'm going to say, do you understand this is what I want?
Right.
Yes. Now, two things. Will you be able to implement my wishes? Two, this is really cold, but do I believe you could?
Right.
Because I can tell you with my sainted children, I don't know that I could.
Right.
I want to say I could,
Right.
but even if it meant never talking to them again, but just being able to see them every day, don't know if I could pull the plug.
Right. Right.
Pull the plug on me? No problem.
Right.
If I have the ability, I can do that to me.
Right. And I think that's when then you start to think about, well, is it a family member then? Is it a trusted friend?
And because my natural instinct is there's nobody I trust more than my darling bride.
Right.
She's been with me 100 years, I couldn't trust, but wait a minute, more than 70, 80% of the time, we're together. So if that Big Mac truck comes through the red light,
You both may be unconscious.
yeah, and we're going to look at each other eyes to eyes and not be able to express.
Right.
And I want to believe that, yes, if I could be telepathic, she'd know what I'm thinking.
Right.
Get me out of here. But if she can't do anything, I love the idea of who's the backup. But yet, again, it's got to be a backup that can make a cold, hard decision based on our conversation.
Right. Right. And again, it gets down to having that conversation. For years, it used to be a recommendation to, and I don't know how I feel about this, but to do it after the Thanksgiving dinner, because people are all gathered together. I'm not sure that's the best time to do it. I think that puts a lot of pressure.
Yuck.
Yeah, but to find a time to just
Wait a minute.
sit quietly, and it doesn't have to be emotional. And if it does become emotional, that may be a big clue for you that this
You
person
got the wrong
can't
person
do
in
that.
the room.
Right.
I was going to say, wait a minute. Thanksgiving, a time of joy, of getting together. When do you have 10 minutes of quiet? I don't want quiet. I want to be with my grandson. I want to be
Right.
with my kids.
Some people are into the football or
Whatever.
whatever. So
No,
I always thought that was a very odd time, but to find a time is the important thing. Find
Yeah.
the time to have the conversation. And I think the nice
And your
thing,
designee and your backup and you.
just
And if it's not your darling bride or your husband, partner, whatever, all get together and sit down and say, okay, this meeting sucks.
Mm-hmm.
There's no nice way of saying, I'm talking about what happens in a situation that I don't want to deal with.
right,
But if I don't deal with it now, I'm going to dump it on somebody.
right,
And I'm not quite sure that somebody will make the same decision. I can't think of anything worse for me than to have an active mind in a dead body.
right.
Oh, for the love of God.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people, and then again, you have the people like me who go like, oh, plug me up. Yeah, I want everything.
But, it's funny because now you start saying, wait a minute, I could watch my grandson grow up.
Well, that's the nice thing about a healthcare proxy. You can always change it.
Right.
It's not a permanent document. It's a free document. You can get them at your doctor's office. You can get them at the hospital. In fact, most times, if you do have to go to the hospital, one of the things that they're going to ask you to do is fill out a healthcare proxy form or bring your current healthcare proxy form with you, which is a very good idea, just to make sure that the doctor has it on file in their office, that you've given a copy to your healthcare agent and your backup. If you decide, I need to change this, I don't like this,
You
I
can
want to
always
change
change
it, you can tear it up, you can pick a new agent, you can do whatever you
Nancy,
want.
when I was 20 years old and I believed I was immortal, I had a certain outlook on life. It's changed now that I've had daughters and now that, the prince has arrived, my grandson. I live to just, as we were talking about, our new saying, carpe baby,
Yep.
seize the baby.
Right,
And you take the baby and off we go.
right.
You know,
And appreciate the
and
moment.
maybe I don't want you to unplug me if I believe there's a chance that I'll sit around a couple weeks waiting to see the next, the next vision of my grandson growing. And if I can last a few years, maybe that's worth me sitting there and, oh God, at least put me in front of CNN or Fox News so I can watch something.
And I think the other thing to appreciate is that the rules are different in each state. So what you think is a good healthcare proxy here in Massachusetts, if you're a snowbird and you like to winter in Florida, you may want to check out what the Florida requirements are.
So where do I start? Okay, healthcare proxy.
Healthcare proxy is the most basic.
So I go to Google and I say healthcare proxy form.
Right, in Massachusetts. And
if I go a lot to Florida or Virginia, I want both.
yeah, I would. I think that's a good way to sort of protect
Well, yeah,
yourself.
I mean, especially if I get down to Florida and I find out that void.
Right, exactly, exactly.
I'm back in the same situation.
Now, the other thing to think about is a lot of people go to an attorney and get what they call a living will. Now, Massachusetts really doesn't recognize living wills. So to have an attorney, you're paying an attorney to do a living will, that's your personal choice, but it doesn't necessarily hold any weight.
Now, wait a minute, a living will.
Would be along the lines of, this is what I want, this is what I don't want.
When people think of wills as, I have 10 shekels, 2 goes to my wife, 2 goes to my kids.
That's a last will and testament.
But that is the confusion, because
That's
when you
right.
say a living will, I have a will and I'm living, yes.
Yeah. And a living will simply says, I want to be resuscitated, I don't want to be resuscitated. If you have a healthcare proxy, you're in very good shape.
But doesn't the healthcare proxy take precedent?
It does, in Massachusetts. Other states will recognize living wills. I want to be taken care of by my daughter. But again, it's worth, if you're somebody who travels a lot or spends significant amounts of time in other states for long periods of time.
Check it out.
Check it out. And if you get stuck in not finding anything on the internet, check with your local senior center.
Oh.
That would probably be a very
So
good resource.
that's more effective than saying Nancy Durkin of Virginia.
Right.
Who's the
you
Nancy
could,
Durkin?
ideally, the visiting nurse agency in
So you
that
can check
area.
out the VNA anywhere and say, hey guys, where do I go?
Right. Can somebody tell me about the rules in this state?
So I print down my healthcare proxy.
Right.
What do I want written in a healthcare proxy?
Well, it's very simple. For the most part, it's just the name of your agent and the contact information for your agent, and then the name of your backup agent and the contact information. And then you have it witnessed. You all sign it, and you have a witness. And what you're saying is, and if you want, you could add in detail, like, I do not want this, and I do want this. But for the most part, you're just saying on that form, I've talked to these people and they understand my wishes. And when they sign, they're saying, we've talked about this and we understand Al's wishes. So it can be as detailed as you want or as basic as that.
So I can't put in there, if my darling bride is upset at me and I get a hangnail, do not pull the plug.
Right. Right. Yeah. Hangnails don't.
Hangnails don't count.
They-
Leave that plug in there.
Sorry, they may hurt quite a bit, but they don't count.
So I pull down the healthcare proxy. The real important thing is, who's my agent? Who's going to make a life and death decision about me?
Mm-hmm.
And then who's the backup?
Mm-hmm. And communicating it.
And then I want to give a copy to my primary care physician, and especially here in the center of the universe. I mean, Uncle Phil has made such a thing out of these electronic medical records. I never believed him until I changed doctors. And all of a sudden, Dr. Carlson's going tick, 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 and everything comes up. I said, dang, it works.
It does work.
Everything
does
I gave my old physician,
It's right there.
it's right there. So my primary care should get one.
You can
Agent backup.
You could give a copy to the hospital.
Huh, would they keep it?
Yes. They would scan it right into your medical record,
Oh, cool.
which is what we do at the VNA. We have an electronic medical record, so we would scan your healthcare proxy. So if you came on service, if you heaven forbid, had some reason for needing a visiting nurse to come in, we would take a copy of your healthcare
Now,
proxy.
Once, whether I give it to my primary care, if it's in the tri-county system, it's going to get scanned in, it's part of my EMR.
As far
and
as I understand.
I'm safe.
Yeah. And the other thing to understand, the healthcare proxy doesn't go into effect until the doctor writes in your medical record, Al currently does not have capacity to make healthcare decisions. That may mean...
So I don't have to be like comatose, knocked out. I could have had a stroke and just the dementia set in and I have no idea how to take care of myself.
Right. So once the doctor writes that in your medical record, that gives your healthcare agent permission to start having conversations with your doctor on what's your care plan, what's your treatment plan. Now, in the case of sometimes for an elderly person who may get a bladder infection, they may get very, very confused. And the doctor could write in the medical record, Nancy currently does not have capacity to make healthcare decisions. The healthcare proxy is invoked. So then they would contact my healthcare proxy agent who would say, yes, it's a very treatable condition. Yes, please start her on antibiotics. In a very short period of time, I will have cleared. I would be my old self, alert and oriented and able to make my own decisions. The doctor would then write in my medical record.
She's back.
It's revoked. The healthcare
Right.
proxy is revoked. So it's that flexible. It can be invoked and then it can be revoked.
The amazing part is I would make the naive assumption that if something happened to me, that my darling bride automatically has the say in whatever. It seems natural to me. I mean, she runs my life now. Why couldn't she do it officially? Right? I mean, you think about it.
Right.
All joking aside, anything that happens to her, to me, whatever, it's us.
Yeah.
And after 40 years together, it's us.
But
you're saying if something really happened,
yeah.
it's Jeff Hopkins could step in the middle.
Well, or find somebody else. That's the issue. Then it really becomes a scramble to find somebody who's going to act like your healthcare agent and trying to find what you're thinking.
If I'm hit and I'm suffering dementia, I'm not going to have a vote in this.
No.
Somebody's going to assign. It's kind of like an orphan where the court all of a sudden says,
well, that's
the
what would
children are
happen. That's what would happen. It would have to go to court. And the court would have to make a decision of who your surrogate decision maker would be.
dang, I trust Jeff Hopkins better than some judge I've never met.
Yeah, but the doctor doesn't have that authority.
Right.
So it would have to then
But it's just
resort
like
to a
when we
court.
first had to write the papers of who we would designate
Yeah.
to take care of our children if the two of us
Right.
got into a fatal accident.
That's right.
And-
It's the exact same conversation. It's a little different, granted, but it has that same emotional content, plus the requirement of being very analytical and very logical about who is the best person. Is this person going to raise my child the way I believe my child should be raised and support my child in a way that I would like to have
Right.
it supported? Is this the person who's going to make the right healthcare decisions for me and is going to follow my wishes? It's emotional, but it's very analytical. It's like really putting on your thinking cap.
Yeah, and there's not much, I mean, you think about it, there's not much or any action, not much more I can do than decide who's going to make the decisions on how I spend the last few years before I take that, hopefully the bus ride is north, if they hand me suntan lotion, I'm going to get upset from the beginning. But, you think about it, all kidding aside, this is the same, only it's about me this time.
Right.
Same kind of decision we had to make over, if we're gone, who are we going to entrust our children to?
Right. The other thing that's relatively new, is when you do have a terminal diagnosis, or a diagnosis that is severe enough that could lead eventually to your death. In the past, a lot of people would get what they called a DNR order, a do not resuscitate order. That's changed quite a bit. It's now called medical orders for life-sustaining treatment. And I know we have a slide on that, and if it's possible to pull that up, that
Let's
would
see
be
if we can
helpful.
pull up slide number 1. Here we go.
Yes, that's it. Now, it's kind of hard to read, I understand. And the other twist to it is that it comes in a shocking bright pink. This form is something that you sit down with your doctor and you go over the specifics of what you want.
So what's on this form?
Well, one of the things that's on there is whether or not you want CPR. So if you think about the old DNR was you're in your home and suddenly you are no longer responsive, you're not breathing, and there doesn't appear to be a heart rate. With the DNR, it meant nothing happened. You would just be let go. With this, you could say, yes, I want CPR. I may be non-responsive, but do some CPR. Or do you want to be ventilated? That's the other thing where they put in the tube to help you with the breathing. Do you want to be transferred to the hospital? Do you not want to be transferred to the hospital? So it goes through a whole series of what do you want and what do you not want? And do you want a feeding tube? Do you want hydration? Do you want an IV to keep you hydrated? And this is a conversation that you have with your doctor, and then you can keep this shocking bright pink form with you, and it goes with you wherever you go. Now, the most concrete example I can give you.
Now, wait a minute. I'm going to carry a shocking pink form
think
that
about
talks
this.
about.
Yeah.
I just have it scanned into the EMR. And
It will be scanned into the EMR. It will
I don't
definitely
mind
be
the
scanned.
shocking pink, but if every time I open up my jacket,
Yeah, it's
there's the
kind of
form
crazy.
that's it. Yeah.
So the most concrete example I can give you on why you would want to consider this, my partner, who eventually became my husband, ended up in the hospital, very ill, and had gotten a terminal diagnosis. He was currently up at UMass in Worcester. While he was there, he had a DNR, and this was something, he had talked about. I knew, I was his healthcare proxy, everything was fine. So he had the DNR order while he was in the hospital. For him to come home, and home is another half hour south of here, so it was a good hour-plus drive home, and he had to go by ambulance. He had to get a second DNR for the ambulance ride from Worcester to our home. Then when he got home, we had to get a third DNR for him to be in the home in case something happened in the home. So the DNR was related to where the patient was, as opposed to
Wait a minute,
related
I
to...
did a DNR. Now you put me in an ambulance, you
I need
say
a new DNR,
your DNR doesn't count?
because it was only for the hospital.
Okay, what bureaucrat came up with that
Well,
idea?
this is why they came up with the MOLST, and it's called MOLST, so it's hard to say, and I probably lisp while I say it, but it's MOLST. It's so medical orders for life-sustaining treatment.
Yes.
And then it got even more complicated for us, because then David went for radiation. So he had to go by ambulance for radiation. So we then had to get another DNR to cover that ambulance.
Wait a minute, can't I get a master DNR?
Well,
that
this
says
is
no
why-
matter- Is the most kind of like enough of the nonsense?
Yes, exactly.
No matter if I'm in the house, the car, the hospital. This is what I want to happen to me.
Exactly. And that's why they came up with the MOLST. So it is the patient's tool. It's a tool for you, and yet you fold it up and you put it in your wallet, put it in your pocket, put it in your purse. I don't care. If you're going to go out and
Ew.
but if you collapse and you're not responsive, the EMTs.
But won't they have, I mean, I'm joking because I just can't see me carrying all these forms. But if I scan it and it's in my medical records.
Well, it's fine if you're at the hospital.
Oh, good point.
Or
If I'm
at
in a
your doctor.
restaurant.
Yeah, they're not going to know. And ideally, and again, this is usually, you and I aren't going to go out and get a MOLST tomorrow. I mean, I'm relatively healthy. I don't feel the need to get a MOLST just yet. If I'm 95, I may want to get a MOLST. If I have a severe enough diagnosis where, maybe it's a severe cancer diagnosis or a congestive heart failure diagnosis.
But Nancy, you never know. I mean, all joking aside, my physician tells me, okay, you fat old man, lose weight or else. He's right. Tomorrow I could walk down the street, have a heart attack.
Right. Well, nobody knows. Nobody, that's the randomness of life. You could walk out into the parking lot and somebody could go zooming by and hit you. That's the randomness of
But
it.
you're bringing up something I never thought of. Okay, so you're with your partner, whatever type partner it is, I don't care. But you're not married to somebody. And you assume then that they don't have the rights to, but wait a minute, even if you're married, they don't have, I mean, you really should have these forms, kind of like your
Really
last
gotta
will
do-
and
yeah,
testament.
You really, yes. You really got to do, I'm so passionate about it. I'm sitting quietly, but I'm really very passionate about do your healthcare proxy.
Yeah,
Do
and if you
your
do
healthcare
want your
proxy.
partner to make that decision, my God, I'd hate to have my darling bride take a spectator seat because I didn't fill in a form and now she can't
Right.
make those decisions.
Right.
And if I don't want her to, whoever my, selected person is, whether it's my spouse or partner or not,
No, your best friend, it could be.
doesn't matter, but I
Doesn't
want
matter.
somebody to have the ability to make those decisions.
And again, it goes back to the whole, I think it was one of my first comments, is knowledge is power. The more you, as much as you may not want to think about this and then act on it, you're in a much more, you have more control than by not talking about it.
Sure.
And the way healthcare has been going for the last 10 years, and definitely going to continue to go, is you as the patient are really in the driver's seat. You and your doctor have to work in a collaborative, cooperative relationship, and that means learning how to have that conversation with your doctor about, I really want to understand my diagnoses, and what does this mean? And then maybe doing some homework, or saying to the doctor, I just don't understand what you just said. I have a perfect example. God love my family. I have a brother who has been going through some pretty significant health issues. He's gone through a series of cancer treatments, and now he's having a series of kidney problems. And he lives out of state. So he doesn't, I'm his backup healthcare proxy in that state, but my other sibling, my other brother, is down there with him. So he's the primary. So he's involved in it. But neither one of them feel comfortable in saying to the doctor, I don't understand what you just said. And so when I get on the phone with them, they'll say, well, his levels were kind of weird. And it's like, well, what levels?
Yeah, could you be a little more technical?
Well, it was some kind of Krieg level. And it's like, okay, did you write it down? Did you ask them to spell it? So, and not that I know a lot of the medical terminology, I try to
But
hold
you
my
can
own.
look it up.
I
mean,
can look it up.
If they spell out creatinine, or if they spell out, then I can go Google and say, oh, now what?
Now
But
I understand.
The Cree thing,
Right.
and it's weird.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, now technically, what is weird?
Yeah, yeah. What are they going to do about it? What's the plan? Oh, they're going to do, and so I feel people's pain, but it really is coming to the point
if
that
I want to be molested.
if you want to be molested,
I want
okay.
to be
All right.
molested upon.
Okay.
I go drop down the form.
Yep.
I read the form.
Yep.
I discuss the form with whoever I believe I can trust to be my number one.
Right.
I discuss it with whoever I believe can be my number one backup.
Yep. And then you sit down with your doctor and go over it.
That's what, okay, so now I fill it all in. Mm-hmm. I bring it to my primary care.
Actually, your doctor has to fill it all in.
Oh, I don't get to fill it in.
No. You can get a sample of it so that you can.
So I can do like, in pencil, whatever, and I sit there and say, I think I got it.
Yep.
Now,
I think I understand what ventilation means. I think I understand what artificial nutrition means, and I think I want it or I don't want it. And my healthcare proxy agent understands it, and my backup understands it. And then you go to the doctor and you say, okay, can we complete
now
the
do I have
most?
to set up an appointment and do a copay? I mean, how do I do that? Is that
You are, most insurances now, I think you're allowed one wellness visit a year,
okay?
so you could do
But I
it
mean,
then.
worst comes to worst, if I got a $20 copay or whatever, well, I'd have to ask the doctor, because I don't know, can he charge? When I go
For doing
in,
that, yeah, and
and
there's
you
so
go to
many
your doctor and she
insurances.
says, I'm charging you $20. Well, no, she's really charging you $350. All but 20 of it is covered, so you
Right.
pay the 20.
Right.
That's an interesting question for a future
Yeah.
show, is to sit there and say, okay,
Well, and again, if you have a diagnosis that's serious enough where a MOLST would be an appropriate conversation,
yeah, but there I may disagree with you, Nancy, because you're kind of convincing me that I should be molested upon, just in case.
I think that's, I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. I would not necessarily think that way.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking, I'm going to walk out, get hit by a car, and
Yeah, but that's,
So-
yeah. If you have a good
Does it
healthcare
hurt?
proxy, if you have a good
oh,
healthcare
okay,
proxy.
wait a minute. Okay, then I feel better. So if
Yeah.
I have a good healthcare proxy,
Yeah, if you've done your homework with your healthcare proxy agents, those random, crazy, icky things that can happen will be
Okay.
covered.
now you're
But
making
if-
me feel better.
Right, but if you have a diagnosis of, like my brother, of cancer, and now it appears like some kind of kidney
Renal
failure.
issues.
Yeah. For him, and the state he lives in, they don't have a MOLST that I know of. He would probably, and he has, in fact, gotten a DNR. That state uses a DNR, so he does have a DNR. And
Then it sounds like the next time I go in for my annual with my physician, I should ask some basic questions. Okay, I got a healthcare proxy, or I don't. Let me get one. I've picked out number one man, woman, backup man, woman. Doc, do you see a reason, let's hope he says no, that I need a MOLST?
Right.
Okay.
Well, or, what are my medical conditions right now? As we get older, oddly enough, we seem to pick up things like hypertension. Some people pick up diabetes. Some people pick up. It just seems that.
Yeah, well, diabetes,
Gum disease.
I nurtured by being rotund
Yeah.
for many years.
There you go. So, as we get older, our bodies start to feel the effects of aging, and we suddenly, when we were 25, everything was hunky-dory and maybe a sprained ankle or something. But by the time we hit 40 or 45, suddenly we're starting to build a nice little repertoire of diagnoses and maybe the need for medication. and just really understanding what those diagnoses are about. Are you doing the things that the doctor has advised you to do to take care of yourself? Are you taking your medication regularly? Are you managing your diet? Have you done things like not smoked or given up smoking? If drinking is an issue, like there's too much drinking, maybe have you cut back on that or have you stopped? So having those conversations with the doctor, understanding what those diagnoses are and what your plan of care is. Being in that driver's seat and your doctor is your passenger, as opposed to the doctor being in the driver's seat and you're sitting in the back seat just sort of looking out the window. It's a real change in approach, that you are the driver of your healthcare.
So healthcare proxy, if I need one most, then?
Go have a good time. I mean, in a healthy way.
In a healthy way, yes. Yes.
So-
Gone are my cohibas, gone, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the silliness that we did when we were 20 years old is a nice
like
memory.
silliness.
It was a good memory. It's a very good memory. Very good memories. You know, and you know, some of the other things that you and I have been talking about is how do you start to have really hard conversations when it is maybe an end-of-life issue? How do you know, and maybe someday we can sit down and really start to flush that out a little bit more. Or even talking more about what are some of the changes in healthcare, you know, from the VNA perspective. Home healthcare is changing all the time. The things that we never thought we could do in the home, we're now doing in the home. There's new technologies. People aren't staying in hospitals for very long periods of time, and they're not staying in rehab for a very long period of time. They really are getting back into the home environment much more quickly, and that has changed the way a lot of our practices are, because we have much sicker people that we are able to keep
But
at
we
home.
also get new areas or new old areas. You know, when you think of TB, I was amazed, number one, to find out how efficient the VNA was. You know, when you think of stretching your healthcare dollar, you know, one day in the hospital funded an army of VNA visits.
That's right.
But, you know, when the Board of Health came back to us and said they have to increase the VNA budget to make sure that tuberculosis does not get back into our schools, I mean, it kind of hit me like, you mean like polio and other things that, those don't exist anymore, do they?
Yes, they do.
And all of a sudden we found out they do, because people were coming from parts of the world where it wasn't eradicated. And some of the people weren't as educated as they should be, so they weren't really taking the full treatment. And now you think about it, I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent, when depending on whether you're the Irish, the Italian, the Portuguese, the Brazil, we can go through every immigration wave that came to Milford. The initial people that came were small homes, lots of people, while they tried to get themselves
Right,
on their feet.
right.
And then you sat there and said, what a better breeding ground for something like TB or any airborne,
Yeah.
you know, pathogen.
The influenza, the influenza epidemic in 1918 was what started the Milford VNA.
Well, and you wouldn't think that's an issue today.
This year, a lot of people died of the flu.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what Massachusetts numbers were, but there was some pretty high national numbers.
But you start thinking about how important it was for the VNA. I mean, important enough that the state mandated that you can't just give the pills, whatever, to the patient. You had to go there and watch them.
Right, right, right. Directly observed therapy.
You always have fancy names for it. Watch them.
Yeah.
Directly observed
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah. DOT.
Dots.
Yeah.
But, you know, you start thinking about how important it is. Because otherwise, you know, that adult that has TB, you know, cuddling with their children who now go to the school and come in contact with 30 more children or 100 more children?
And again, there are new diseases out there and new issues, and the bottom line is if we can keep people home and take care of them at home, how much better you feel as a person. You know, you're in your own home, you got your own things around you, you know, the nurse comes in twice a week, 3 times a week, physical therapy or occupational therapy or speech therapy comes out, you can get a social worker to help you figure out, well, do I need a healthcare proxy, or, you know, what's my plan? You know, what if I am 95 years old and the house is too much for me? What are my options then? You know, and how do I cope with giving up this home that I've lived in for 75 years?
Yes.
That's a big conversation. That's a very heavy conversation.
We've started to have that conversation already when my darling bride says, there's now 3 of us in this house. Why do we? She's the logical one, but it's my house. I built it. You know, every room has memories of the kids in it.
Right.
You know, but you're getting to a point where you're sitting there saying, okay, we haven't been in this part of the house in 2 months. Do we really need to heat and cool?
And is it accessible to you? Think about it. If you get to a point where walking becomes a problem, are there, you know, I have a dear friend who has this lovely old Victorian home, and she was very into health and exercise and, you know, could run millions of miles. And I went over to her house and I said, and the intent was for her and her husband to stay in that house to the very end. But the bathroom and the bedrooms were on the 2nd floor. And didn't she have to have a hip replacement? And suddenly the bathroom and the bedroom on the 2nd floor was really problematic.
Well, we had that issue with my mom more the 1st floor of the house, which was always hers. Had a bathroom, but we were more concerned that if she fell in the middle of the night, we're over in one wing of the house, 2 floors up.
How do you know?
We would never know.
Right.
You know, and you can put on the fallen and I can't get up, or, but if she fell and was unconscious, it could be tomorrow morning before we wake up and go down and check on her.
The technology has gotten better with the personal emergency response systems out there. So they do have fall detection.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if the person doesn't respond, you know, the sensor will pick up that the patient has fallen. And if the person doesn't respond
within a period of time, I better watch out that my darling bride doesn't try and stick one of those on me.
They actually have gotten so good that there are some systems out there that people can leave the house and they will be tracked through cellular towers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if they fall outside somewhere, they'll be able to find them.
Well, I mean, it's even the people who suffer from Alzheimer's.
Right.
What a great thing that, you know,
the tracking watches.
You get scared to death. I mean, I came upstairs once and my mom's out on the deck. And my heart starts, you know, to beat because if she had fallen, I just went away for 10 minutes.
Yep. Well, it's like having, in this case, a toddler.
Well, that's unfortunately, I think emotionally the hardest thing to deal with is that you got a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old.
Right.
And you can't get frustrated because when she does silly things, she has no idea.
Right. And she's purely living in the moment. You know, I try to work with my in-laws and helping them understand that my mother-in-law is just living in the moment. She's just living in the moment, and they get so frustrated. And they're like, "Ma, don't you remember?" And
no,
she can't. You know.
How many times she'll ask, "Is it time to go? You know, to grandma daycare?" "No, Ma, it's 7:30 at night. We're going to go to bed soon." 10 minutes later. Remind me of that movie, that Dory movie, the little fish that has the short-term memory loss. You know, and 10 minutes later she comes and says, "It's time to go to daycare." You know, you can't get upset.
No.
You just can't, because you have to look and say, if my grandson did that, you know, if he was 4 years old and he did that, I'd say, well, he doesn't know any better.
Right. Right.
But this is
The problem is you see the person, you see
my mother.
Right.
The one I've looked up to.
Right.
You know, I mean, I've been fortunate to have 4 wonderful women in my life, you know, that I absolutely adore. And that's my sainted mother, my darling bride, my 2 ungrateful offspring. You know, but you sit there and say, I can be analytical, I can be objective about almost anything, but not those 4. You can't ask me if I don't believe that my daughters are the most beautiful, intelligent, you know, you go right through it. Of course they are, they're my daughters. You know, as an old man, I get to keep a couple fantasies in my life. That's one of them.
Right.
You know, the fantasy that my darling bride won't wake up and realize that she married so far beneath her that she throws me out. I mean, you know, I want my little fantasies.
Right.
But it's my sainted mother.
Right. That's where it's really hard. It's really hard. And in many ways, she's not the person that you knew. She's a whole new person.
And I think that's the problem, because when I think I see my mother, I don't see a almost 94-year-old. I see the 30-year-old, full of energy woman that
Well,
could.
the woman that we talked about how many years ago when we were doing the show a couple of years ago, where she was out doing the gardening still,
Yes.
you know, and very much on top of it.
The woman that when she was working at Draper's as a drill press operator, friends of mine who went there for the summer said, your mother is a machine. We can't keep up with her. And it's hard to take that vision and realize that, no, she's mortal. It's now my time to pay her back for everything she put up with when I grew up. You know, and that she didn't throw me to the curb.
Right.
And that's always the hardest part. I mean, I've been blessed that my darling bride realized. My mother would have been dead. When my dad passed away 30 years ago, 29 years ago, she was here in Milford by herself. She would have been one of those people that just shriveled up, because it was only the 3 of us. I'm an only child. There was nobody else. Her living up here by herself, she wouldn't have made it. I know it. I got lucky that Sharon said, you know, your mother has to live with us. And I was like, you're bringing this up?
You were lucky.
And it didn't take but microseconds for my mother to walk in the door, target, radar acquisition, lock, my daughter. All of a sudden, there was a focus point for my mother. And the girls have grown up with Grandma always there. I mean, the 2 of us worked, so school bus, Grandma was there. You know, dinner, Grandma always made dinner, because the kids would never eat what we ate. So there was always 2 or 3 dinners in the house. You know, and now you got to remember, I mean, till she was 80-some years old, I'd get home after playing hockey, there's a hot cup of tea on my nightstand.
So this raises another issue. Are you her healthcare proxy agent?
Yes.
Has it been invoked so you can make healthcare decisions for her?
You know, that's an interesting question, because I never thought, you know, you get the credit card and it says this is not usable till you activate. I got the healthcare proxy, I got the power of attorney, I've got everything, but I never.
Yeah, so now is the time to have a conversation with her doctor of, does she have the capacity to understand her healthcare? Do we need to invoke the healthcare proxy? And now I'll take it one step farther. If in fact the doctor invokes the healthcare proxy, you as the healthcare proxy agent then sit down with the doctor and do the most for her.
It's an interesting question, because I have to admit, I never thought of, you know, calling the 800 number to peel off the thing on the credit card saying I have it.
Yep.
I never thought to go to the physician and say, I have the healthcare proxy. I have the power of attorney. I've gone through all our shows. After every show, I run home and I do something new. But it never hit me to say, wait a minute.
So that's So this is great that we're having the conversation go this way. So as the caregiver, healthcare proxy agent, there is that responsibility of saying, gee, has it reached a point where the doctor just doesn't know because he hasn't seen my loved one or my friend or whoever, and maybe we need to get it invoked, get the healthcare proxy invoked. And then if there is no MOLST already in place or
Make
DNR, you as the invoked healthcare proxy agent have the conversation and fill out the MOLST with the doctor. Because think about it, would you want to put your mother through CPR?
No, but again, I can feel the shivers
Yeah,
that I have to admit my mother's mortal.
yeah.
I don't
And
wanna-
that's why the conversation gets hard.
Yeah.
It gets emotional, and yet at the same time, you have enough of an analytical approach to it to know
Well, you know what has to be done.
you do.
You know what has to be done. But it's just that whole idea. I mean, we were joking around on my weekend was the greatest I could have. I had my mother, my darling bride, and my 2 daughters, all sitting around watching TV, and my grandson,
Couldn't ask for
the
better.
micro-terrorist,
Yep.
terrorizing everything in the area.
Yep.
What more could you want? You know? So, preview, what's next?
We have a couple of options. We could go with having our new executive director from the VNA come in with me, and we can talk about what's going on with the home health care industry. We could bring in the rehab manager and talk about some of the new treatments that are out there and what are we doing from a physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech therapy approach that's pretty innovative in the home. The other thing that's really big right now, I'm working closely with our hospice director about what is called the Conversation Project. And it's how to have that conversation with your doctor, with you and your loved ones about we are facing an end-of-life decision, and this is how it's going to play out, and how do we have the conversation?
2 out of 3 of those I look forward to being on. Learning how to have that conversation.
It may surprise you how reassuring it is.
No, it's the right thing.
It's empowering.
It's the right thing.
Yeah.
But just emotionally, eesh.
Yeah, it's hard.
As always, Nancy brings topics to us. I'm serious. When I leave these shows with her, I immediately go out and take certain actions. But we're hoping that it will stimulate you, you know, and hopefully our 6 loyal viewers, none of you ever for a long time have to have these conversations, but seriously think about it, because better you should have it and take actions now than to leave it with your children or your loved ones. So Nancy, thank you. We look forward to the next 3. As always, may God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight for our 6 loyal viewers. Good night, all.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just searching for my soul.